Hi, everybody. Welcome to Meditation Mastery. I am here with a large camel deep in the heart of Seattle, Washington. So, really have made it all the way up to the other coast, shore to shore on this trip. And I'm happy to be here with you all, giving another talk. And I was asked to give a talk on a specific theme. And so it seems like we'll be slowly shifting gears into more Buddhist grounded discussions today, and maybe even over the next few talks. So in Buddhism, the Buddha, he gave a set of teachings for practice. He kind of gave the way to practice, the way to live one's life, to kind of bring the mind towards the place of enlightenment, to bring the mind towards a place of peace and freedom and release. And one of the instructions that he gave was through a schematic, through a picture of the different qualities that one needs to arise to create the mind of enlightenment. And I guess I could even say it like if you look in nature, you see that if you want to grow a plant, you have to plant the seed, and you have to give it soil and the right temperature, and you have to give it water, and it needs space, and it needs time, and it needs all of these elements to be in place. And when everything's in place and in balance, then the plant can grow. And the Buddha's way of talking about this, it's actually called the Eightfold Path. And these are like the 8 elements that you need to grow the mind of enlightenment. So the Eightfold Path, it talks about the way that we need to be. It talks almost like about all the different components and facets of ourself, and the way to grow these facets of ourself, what we should be aiming towards in these different kind of quadrants of our life to grow towards enlightenment. The Eightfold Path, it is a path that needs to keep getting refined and refined and refined as you're moving through it. That you start wherever you are, and then you slowly keep getting it more and more focused and refined. And when you have kind of perfectly refined it, that's when you reach enlightenment. This is perfect refining moment. So the Eightfold Path, it consists of 8, again, I would call them like factors or 8 areas of our life. So for instance, the Eightfold Path, it talks about having the right view, about having the right intention, about having the right effort, having the right speech, the right action, the right livelihood, right? It talks about having the right concentration and the right mindfulness. And it's kind of like you can take each of the areas of the Eightfold Path and you can kind of refine it, you can focus it, and you can work on it. And by working on one, you kind of can start working on the other ones through it. And I'll get into that in a little bit. But also you can take them all kind of like individually and look at them and refine them and understand them and practice them. And through practicing the Eightfold Path, you start to develop and cultivate the mind. So I might even give a series of talks, and maybe the theme for the next couple talks could be the Eightfold Path, where I'll kind of take them in little sections and stages and go into them. So the beginning and the very first kind of thing that the Buddha talks about, he calls it right view or right understanding. So it begins with right view because right view means you have to kind of know what it is that you're doing, right? It's like to practice, you have to understand that, you're practicing to become more peaceful, right? You're practicing to become more grounded, to become freer, to become happier, to become more open, more flexible, more joyful, that you have to have the right understanding of what it is you're doing. If you're kind of shooting an arrow, you need to know what you're shooting the arrow at. You need to have like a target. If you just have an arrow and you don't have a target, then, where are you shooting it? You could shoot it anywhere. And if you shoot it at the wrong thing, maybe you're going to kill somebody, right? Maybe you're going to kill yourself if you shoot it inwards, right? So it could be dangerous to focus on the wrong thing. There's an expression that sometimes you climb a ladder only to realize that it was leaning up against the wrong wall, right? So, if you're lost in the forest, you need a map. You need to see, like, how do I get from where I am to where I want to be? And so right view and right understanding, it's kind of about that. It's saying, like, you need to have the understanding of, like, where you are, what you want, where you're going, where you're heading, to start moving yourself in that direction. In Buddhism specifically, right view also means that you have an understanding of karma, for instance. Karma meaning cause and effect. Karma meaning that my actions do matter. The energy, the effort, my intentions, when all that stuff comes together, that matters, that creates an effect. If I sit down to meditate and I do that enough and I start focusing on it and practicing it, that will progress. If I help people, if I live my life freely, if I live in my integrity, if I do things that are healthy for me on the body and the mind and on the spiritual level, I will grow and it will be good for me. If I hurt people, if I steal, if I live outside of my integrity, if I live at the expense of other people, that will weigh on me. I'll feel guilty. I'll feel ashamed. That'll make me feel heavier and closed down. Knowing that karma is like a real thing. If I stick my hand in fire, it will burn my finger. Just causes and effects are real. Yeah, for instance, that's a part of it. In Buddhism specifically, they also talk about, like, the cycles of rebirth. To understand that, like, this keeps going, that there's, like, a lot going on, that there's many lives and many dimensions and levels that one could be reborn on and in, and different ways that existence can look, and that the consciousness stream kind of continues. This is important specifically in Buddhism because the whole kind of point of the Buddhist teachings is that he was able to see this. He was able to see his past lives. He was able to see how the mind arose in this life and moved forward. This is actually called Paticca which is, it's about, like, the 12 links. And the 12 links, like, really briefly, and this is like a whole nother talk, but the 12 links of Buddhism, it says that, in our past life, through our ignorance, through not understanding the truth, we created a lot of karma, a lot of movement in this life. And it created a lot of momentum. And through that momentum, when we died in the last life, we were born in this life, that the consciousness came in that, and this is all kind of actually structured out. It says, it begins with ignorance, right? So not knowing. And then it moves to this kind of creation of things coming together. Then it goes to consciousness, that the consciousness stream, it goes into the egg, the mother, right? That the consciousness comes in, and then it binds. Mind and matter come together. And then out of the mind and matter coming together, the 6 senses are born, right? So your sensory organs are created. Because you have sensory organs, your senses start to contact things. Because your senses contact things, you get feelings. Because of these feelings, you want and you don't want things that you're feeling, right? Wanting and not wanting, it leads to creating, to acting, to trying to get more, to trying to get away from. It leads to behaviors, it leads to beliefs, it leads to views, it leads to the entrenching of trying to find happiness through the senses, trying to find peace through getting enough or getting away from enough, right? And through that, it creates this momentum that, again, in this life, when you die, you're grasping on something. You want something that the consciousness, it still is searching and searching, and it goes on into another life. It again becomes something, it again is born, and it again dies. And so this kind of cycle of the consciousness kind of coming into full bloom and existence in a human body, in a human form, and then passing over and moving on again and again and again and again, is something that, the Buddha could see. And I can say that, I have met monks myself and nuns as well that have really gone into deep retreat and deep meditation. And they say that they've been able to actually trace the consciousness back and see past lives. Personally, I've had a couple experiences that were like past life experiences, where my teacher, who had, I would say, psychic powers, it was a whole weekend about this kind of thing. It was a whole weekend about kind of seeing into your past lives. And he looked at me, and I don't know how he did this, but he took his fingers and he looked at me and he pressed right into here in my kind of like in my solar plexus area. He like pushed in, and I suddenly had this flash where I was on a horse and I had a sword in my hand, and an arrow struck me. And I fell off the horse, and then somebody was standing over me and stabbed me. And eventually they stabbed me in that spot, and then I died. And I had this huge thing. I mean, it was painful, and I was crying, and I really felt like I just died. And I kind of then suddenly came out of it, and I was still kind of like holding that sword in my hand. And it was interesting for me because I'm a righty, but my immediately left hand went up holding the sword. And it was just this very clear feeling that, okay, like that was a memory that was somehow buried, locked into my body and my mind, that, my master, and that's what masters do, is he pulled it out. And that was one of those experiences that I made that I said, wow, okay, like there's something going on. And, oh, okay, I died by being stabbed in my solar plexus. And that explains a lot of my like trauma in my childhood in this life, and a lot of the things that I've been feeling, and that I feel like I always have to protect here, and that I'm like kind of afraid of being judged by other people because I have an imprint that it's like, if I'm doing something against somebody else, they might kill me. That it even linked together with a lot of my behaviors in this lifetime, which is really strange. So as far as like Buddhists go in Buddhism, the belief in rebirth is part of that. It's Buddhism. You don't have to believe in that to practice. You don't have to believe in that to practice meditation. The Dalai Lama said, look, there's 3 things going on. One thing is Buddhism. That's like the story of the Buddha and like the religion of Buddhism and that whole thing of Buddhism. One thing is the Buddhist philosophical understandings. And those are things that can apply to everybody. Scientists now are like working with that, and Harvard and MIT at the Mind and Life Institute. And also the Buddhist practices of meditation that actually, again, anybody can practice breathing. Anybody can meditate. You don't have to believe in the whole story of the Buddha to get the benefits and the results from following the mind training, right? Because the Buddhists, we've been meditating forever. Like we have like the best school and thought of meditation. We have the best understanding. My teacher, one of my teachers, Ajahn Brahm, he taught me a lot about meditation, and he was even teaching me the difference between yoga meditation and Buddhist meditation, and how like when you experience this bright light and this bright bliss and your body maybe starts convulsing and stuff comes up, he says like, that's Kundalini awakening. But if you can take that out of the body and channel it into the mind, then that's when you get into samadhi, which is like the deep unifying of the mind. And how a lot of people that have like near-death experiences, they see this big light. And he said, yeah, it's the same thing. That's what we see in our meditations. And there's a lot of also like Christian and Catholic saints that say, God came and they felt this rapture and they saw this light of God. And, when us Buddhists read this, we go, oh yeah, that's a samadhi meditation. But it was contextualized as, oh no, it was God speaking, and I felt this unification and this bliss. And I say to them, like, yeah, I felt that same thing. That's what happens when we go into samadhi. So through understanding Buddhist meditation, you can look around at a lot of different religions, a lot of different schools of thought, a lot of people's experiences, and the context for them because the Buddhists have the best understanding of how the mind works. Yeah, we've really spent like thousands of years studying the mind. So understanding clearly what this practice is about, what the mind is, how the mind works, this all comes into right understanding or right view, which is the first part of the Eightfold Noble Path. And again, that's something that gets refined over time. And it gets refined because even if you read all the books on Buddhism and you say, okay, there's this rebirth thing and we're trying to get free and we're trying to get happy and we want to meditate and, we really kind of get into all this stuff that, here's the frame and here's what it looks like. Until we're experiencing that, it's not real for us. It's not true for us. That having an intellectual understanding, it's the first step. But then to really start to embody it, to start to connect, to synchronize our experience with our understanding is essential. Otherwise, we're walking around saying how much we know, how smart we are. I know all this Buddhist stuff, but we're not applying it to our lives. That when we start to get sick, when we feel unpleasant, when we're in stress, when we're in a crisis, all that stuff goes out the window and you're just going to react like you always have. When I did my prostration retreat, and I was doing the 100,000 prostrations, and I fasted during that time too. So I did 2 weeks where I stopped eating, and then 3 days at the end, I stopped drinking. And I started dying. And as I was doing these prostrations, I was watching myself die. Yeah, it was terrifying. I was like experiencing death, but it was controlled because I knew at any point I could go and drink water or eat. But I was watching myself starting to die. I was watching how the body and the mind panic, how the mind turns to mush, how all that stuff that I learned in the monastery, it went out the window. That I was in such a state of bodily panic and stress that only the things that I had actually embodied fully, that I really had melded with my own experience, that's what remained. All of the stuff that I learned was gone because my mind wasn't even working anymore. Yeah, so it's really important that we start to refine and refine, which means we start to bring it into our own experience. And I can also say the day that, I had my first really deep meditation breakthrough, right? The day that my perception shifted, the day that I kind of was able to get out of the ego, to get a vantage point of everything. That's the day when everything kind of stood on its head and it broke open, and I could see clearly, oh, okay, this is the state that I'd been living in, the perception I'd been living in. But once I made the perception outside of that, it suddenly became clear what all the teachings have been about. It's easy to sit and talk about emptiness, but if you're not experiencing it, it doesn't help you. But the second you've experienced emptiness, you go, oh God, that's what this is about. And then you let go of everything you've ever learned because now your experience lights the way. Yeah, now you've made an actual mark, like a compass point, and you always now know how to go because you're making the experiences yourselves. So the Eightfold Path, it's about, again, it's this like refinement process. So having right understanding, just very basically, and again, like this is a very Buddhist directed talk because this is what I was asked to talk about. So if some of you are kind of like, what is going on? Like, I'm not even Buddhist. I don't even like really understand this or believe it or whatever. To shift it into a way that's even maybe simpler, more easy to understand, we can even just talk about like this meditation practice. Like you guys are practicing meditation. We're here at the Meditation Mastery Group, right? Because you know that meditation is beneficial. Yeah, that you have the right view. You know that this is a practice that's going to help me. And if I kind of stay on it, if I keep trying to practice, if I keep working on this, I'm going to learn something. I'm going to improve, that I'm putting myself in God's way, that I'm going to have a chance to develop by practicing this. Yeah, that you understand just at least that much, right? Or you understand in your life, I'm not going to go and steal something because I'm going to feel guilty, right? Or you know that you're going to try your best to create peace. You're going to try your best to be like a loving partner or a loving parent or a loving child, or to really, hold your ground in relationships in an authentic and genuine and caring way to those around you. That you know for yourself what brings more suffering and what brings more peace and happiness into your life. And you're always working more and more and more to create more happiness in your life and to kind of get away from more of the suffering. And that's all that this path is. It's just kind of focusing that. It's focusing slowly more and more. How can I find more peace? How can I find more freedom? How can I find more release? What is that path and what is not that path? What's supporting me on that? What's pushing me into that? And what's pushing me away from that? And that's, again, right view. You're starting to clearly see what's helping, what's not. If you watch TV all day and then you sit to meditate and your mind's just filled up with politics, then you go, oh, okay, watching TV all day is not helpful to my mind. It makes my mind crazy. Yeah, that you start to see for yourself what is conducive to a good mind state and what's not. Yeah, and all that stuff is right view. So it's just starting to understand for yourself what is the path, what is the right way forward, and what is not the way forward. And that mixes together with truth, with reality, with the way things are, that there are universal truths. Yeah, like I was saying before, like if you're harming other beings constantly, you're not going to feel good. It's like impossible to genuinely feel good and at peace and have an open heart if you are hurting other beings. Those things don't work together. If you are living outside of your integrity, if you really believe something in your heart, but you're not doing that, that's going to create an imbalance. That's going to create stress. That's going to create misery. Yeah, these are just truths. So right view, it also really has to do with starting to understand the reality outside of yourself, the reality that you're a part of, but the bigger reality that's also applicable to others. That's why I can teach meditation. That's why I can sit in a group of people and everyone asks me their questions, and I can kind of talk and weave it together and answer everyone's questions at once without even knowing them personally, but because I know certain truths. Yeah, I know, oh, if you feel grief, here's how to deal with that. If you feel sadness, here's something you can do. If you're angry, here's some tools. If you want to meditate, here's some ways to do that. That there's just some universal truths how to do that. And you could say that about like actually anything. Someone that wants to learn to play piano, there's piano teachers and they say, you sit upright and you put your hands down and here's the middle C and here's how you move your fingers, and there's like classical training. It's like, yeah, here's how you learn to play. And that's something you can give to everybody and they can figure that out. Here's the most efficient way to do it. Here's the way that makes sense with the way the hands are formed, the way the keys are formed. So as a meditation teacher, it's the same thing, but it's more like saying, here's how the mind works. Yeah, and that's also why I'm really happy I went to the monastery, because I always said to people, like, listen, the mind, it's the center of all of your experience. The mind is the center of your experiential universe. Yeah, everything you do, everything you say, everything you think, your whole life revolves around your mind, your consciousness, your perception, your understandings. It's like instead of trying to like learn guitar and trying to like start a business and trying to get like relationships, like trying to do all these things in life, if you could take all that energy and just focus it on the mind itself, just working on the mind itself, clearing out the mind, settling the mind, strengthening the mind, focusing, stabilizing, purifying the mind, you would suddenly notice that everything in your life becomes clear, that everything you do becomes easier, becomes more uplifted. You're living in a more of like a buoyant state because your mind is clean. And when your mind is clean, everything you do, everything you think, everything you're a part of gets that energy, gets that clarity. So actually you can become better at everything by just working on the mind itself, right? Because that's the center of what's going on here. Yes, this is all part of the right view. This is all part of right understanding. And that's kind of the first step. It's to really be clear about like, what am I doing? What is this practice about? What is the way forward? What are the things that help me in this? Like I said, if you're watching TV and you're drinking beer and you're listening to music and you're yelling at people and you're screaming and throwing rocks at the dogs or something, and then you sit down to meditate, it's not going to work, right? But if that you want to meditate, you first like clean out your room, like you set like a nice space, maybe you like light a candle or an incense, or you create like a nice thing and you have like you drink like your warm tea and then you sit and you kind of create this atmosphere of like self-love and kind of embraciveness and groundedness. That's conducive to meditation. Your mind's going to drop in because I want centeredness. I want collectedness, right? So you make sure that you live your life more in a collected way. If you ever get, Thich Nhat Hanh's teachings, Thich Nhat Hanh is a Vietnamese Zen master, and he has a book called Peace is Every Step. And that's talking about like every step you take it with mindfulness. He said when you wash the dishes, he said people hate washing dishes. He's like, but the water's like warm and it's nice and the soap, and you feel how nice it is to clean those dishes. And he says, bring mindfulness, bring that collectedness, bring peace into every action, every activity that you do all day long. You're building slowly the mind of enlightenment by doing that because your mind is constantly present. It's constantly appreciative. It's collected in and it wants to be here and it feels good here. So when you sit to meditate, you're already in that space. You're already in that space where you feel good. You already feel like you're halfway there. Yeah, because you've been living your life in a meditative way. You've been collecting, bringing it in. And this is the big disconnect a lot of us have in the West. We think that meditation, it's one thing over here, and our life is one thing over here. And a lot of people in this meditation group, they tell me like they're still struggling with meditation. But the question is, how are you living your life? Yeah, are you changing anything in your life? If you're not changing anything in your life and you just keep sitting down to meditate and it's not working, you're going to get more of the same because it's one mind. The mind that you're meditating with and the mind that you're living your life with, it's the same continuation of mind. So if you're living your life in a very stressful, hectic, unfulfilling way, busy, distractions, the phone, TV, music, people, right? Going, 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 going. And you then try to sit to meditate, your mind is still going to be going. That's the karma, right? That you need to start building into your life in little ways, little pockets, however you want. Be creative, make it fun for you. Find little activities that you can do, that you decide to breathe as you do it. To not watch TV while you eat, but just to eat. Just little things. When your phone rings, take a breath before you answer it. Just build little kind of mindfulness tools into your life to start collecting the mind. So when you sit down to meditate, the mind's already a couple steps in that direction. So this is all right view. Right view also, it's like the rest of the Eightfold Path. For instance, when we say like right livelihood in the Eightfold Path, right livelihood, it's like what you do for a living should not involve killing things. It should not involve stealing from people. It should not involve things that like you deal in death, they say, right? That the way that you make money should not be creating suffering for other beings. So part of right view, it's knowing like the way that I live my life, the way that I make my money, the way my job should not be creating harm overtly. And once you know that you're not creating harm through the way you're making money, even if you could shift it and say, I'm actually benefiting people, I'm benefiting beings by the way that I'm making a living, your mind becomes happy. You feel happy. Like I feel very happy teaching meditation, giving healings, doing work, because I know that this is going to help people. If I was instead making money, somebody actually once offered me, like I think 2 years ago, I was at the Cape Cod in Massachusetts, and I met a man and we became friends really quick. And he's like, look, I have a fishing boat. If you want, you could come out with me. We fish for 3 months out of the year. And he's like, you go 3 days at sea, 2 days home, 3 days at sea, 2 days home. And he said you could make like $150,000, $200,000 in these couple months. And for me, that's insane. Like I have no money. I was like, wow, that's insane. But I just, felt that like rush of, wow, like what would it be like to have that much money all of a sudden in 3 months of work? And then I just looked at him and I said, I cannot kill beings for a living. It's not worth it. And he's like, well, you don't have to kill the fish. Maybe you just bait the hooks. And I felt into that and I said, karmically, it's the same thing, that I cannot be connected to things being killed. That is not in my integrity. That does not feel good in my heart. No amount of money is worth killing for me. My peace at the end of the day matters more. And I said no to him, because that's not right livelihood. And I truly believe that if I lived my life in a way that hurts other beings, I'm not going to feel good. And karmically, that comes back. And I believe that. So knowing clearly what you're doing, right? So right view actually extends across the whole Eightfold Path. Each of the steps or the folds, right? Each of the folds of that path, you have to have the right understanding of that. What do those folds mean? And like I said, I think that I will use like the next couple talks to go more deeply into each of these and to give you an understanding of all these different components and elements of the path, so that when you start focusing on them and practicing them, this is something that will actually lead you towards the mind of enlightenment. And this is directly connected to meditation. In fact, again, one of the folds is right concentration, which is meditation, which is getting into that meditation. So it's all connected. It's the whole kind of picture of what you are supposed to be doing if you want to move in a direction of freedom and liberation and happiness. So, I guess for now that was a mouthful. That was a lot of understanding, a lot of words. And I look forward to kind of leading you through this. Again, we're getting a little bit more into Buddhism, and I know some of you really want to hear that. So that's what the next couple talks will be about, is clarifying this understanding of how to bring your whole life together, to use everything as leverage, as a tool for this path, for an awakened, transformed mind. Okay? So again, thank you. Hello from Seattle with the big camel here. And I'll see you next week, and see you in the meditation.